Hello, human peoples. You're listening to the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. To support us and gain access to great exclusive podcasts like Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and our latest show, Spiel Boys, head over to patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. We do game streaming, movie nights with our patrons every Friday night, and you can even commission your own podcast about anything you want. Literally anything, within reason, and we have to do it. You are quite frankly out of excuses not to go visit patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds.
I think we sound great.
We've always sounded great.
Yeah,
what a duet when you and I get together, right?
Yeah.
what a celestial song, a music of the spheres, you know?
This is definitely going to be a very fun and easy episode.
I know it. I want you to know exactly how I watched this movie, because I think you'll appreciate that part of it.
All right. But first...
Oh, sorry. Yes, we should do the podcast stuff, right?
Yeah. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
My name is David Bell.
And my name is Adam Ganser.
And we just watched Zone of Interest. Like Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah.
Man, this is gonna be a dark one.
Die herrliche Zeit, die wir gemütlich im gastlichen Hause Haus verlebten, wird immer mit zu unseren schönsten Urlaubsländern gehören. Im Osten steht unser Morgen. Herzlichen Dank für eure nationalsozialistische Gastfreundschaft. Heil Hitler. Heil Hitler.
This has a wide release this month, which is to say that I saw this like a month ago. I saw this in like December. I watched it again for this in a packed theater in a Burbank AMC, and they cheered for the Nicole Kidman ad. Yeah. And I was like, guys,
what are you doing?
Yeah, you don't have no idea what movie you're about to see.
Like,
they're like, woo, we come to this place.
Don't
for
cheer
movies.
for it. Yeah. First of all, this is the same ad for 5 years. We don't need a cheer for that. Let's just put that aside. You know?
But yeah, them like, heartbreak feels good in a place like this. It's like, man, it is not going to feel good.
Look at the colors. Look at the sensations. I can't wait.
I want to hear. I want to hear how you saw it, but I also want you to. I want to thank you for being on here.
My pleasure.
And talking about this film with me, and to plug your things. What you got going on?
A few things. So, as I have alluded to from time to time, Maggie Mae Fish and I are starting a podcast called Lynchpins, which is a podcast about David Lynch. So, for those of you who like him or would like to like him, this is a podcast for you. We're gonna release episodes real soon. We've made 2 of them. They are video podcasts. I believe they will be available through her Patreon and also on YouTube. So look for Lynchpins soon.
All right.
And also my doc that I produced is going to be coming out sometime this year. I'm just kind of drumming up interest whenever I show up.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
What's that called? You should say what it's called.
Right now we're talking about calling it Sanibel. And I think that's what it'll stick as, Sanibel.
Okay. Sanibel.
Yeah, it's real good. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I'm excited about it too. You've told me about it. It sounds very good.
Yeah, it's
I've
coming
seen
together.
The trailer for it. Yeah,
I've seen about 70 minutes of a finished cut so far. That meaning that's how much of the movie is pretty close to done. And it's like, oh yeah, this is going to be. I'm happy with a lot of it.
Nice.
Yeah.
So where did you see Zone of Interest?
Okay, great. So I decided this year I'm going to see every Academy movie in the theaters if I can.
Hell
right?
yeah.
Like, this is the year I'm going to do that. So I've been doing it, right? And this is the one that I just couldn't quite line up with my normal movie watching friends. So I was like, I literally in a Slack that my church group has, I was like, anybody want to go see Zone of Interest? And I was like, it's a Holocaust film, so be prepared for that, right? And then 6 people said, yeah, let's watch it. I was like, great. So we all went to watch it. They were all very upset with me at the end of this, just upset that I had suggested it. One of them said, you're not allowed to pick movies for us anymore.
Well, yeah, because church group or any group going to see a movie, unless you're film nerds, you go and you go and see ISS,
That's right.
or you go and see The Beekeeper. You see something that's fun to watch with a group. I've seen this twice, and I saw it alone both times.
Yeah, it deserves
and that's how you're supposed to see it.
It deserves it. Yeah, so like I just want to be clear, like right at the outset, they weren't offended by the movie because there's nothing about the movie to be offended by. I would say
it's upsetting. That's all.
It's upsetting, and I think more important. And now I guess we're jumping into the analysis a bit. More important, it refuses to do what movies fundamentally do, which is it refuses to give you an emotional connection. It refuses to do that. Like you will not have one.
That's kind of the point.
Yes,
it is. It's shot intentionally. We'll talk about how it's shot, but it's shot in a series of wides. And even when the characters are having conversations or emotional moments, they face away from the camera.
Yes.
Because the movie, and it's not like we need this, but the movie wants to be very clear. Like, these aren't our heroes. We're not following them as protagonists in any way, shape, or form. This is, by the way, for people listening, we're being very lively about this. This is a bleak and very serious and very not depressing. Well, yes, depressing.
It's really
but a very
high concept, is what it is. So
it is.
when I was walking out of the theater, again, the people I went to see this with wanted to just go see movies, right? Like they're not art film nerds, which is the right group of people to see this with, if anyone else. So like I explained to them, like, okay, this is like a Marcel Duchamp of a movie, right? This is a John Gage composition. That's what it is. Where the idea is the form of the storytelling and the fact that it refuses to accept the conventions of movies is the most meaningful thing about it.
Yes.
Actually.
It's a big part of this, which it reminds me of Funny Games, the director who made that, who very specifically said, I'd never make a movie about the Holocaust.
Right.
Even Schindler's List, to take such a subject and movify it, I'm just going to use that word, to make it a Hollywood thing, is seen as grotesque. And I would argue that Jonathan Glazer, who is the director of this, who made
Under
Sexy
the Skin.
Beast. Yeah, Under the Skin, Sexy Beast. And I point out those two. He also made Birth.
Yeah.
But those two are like kind of the spectrum of movies, where Under the Skin is more like a mumblecore film. It's slower. But
also barely has narrative.
Exactly.
It's like I'd say that one's closer to this on the spectrum than Sexy Beast.
Exactly. And I was going to say Sexy Beast is like a movie.
Yeah.
And so he knows how to make both, and this is as ramped up in the other direction, where this is an art piece. This is something that you'd see in a museum.
Yeah. So
like playing on a loop almost.
Oh, 100%. In fact, I think I've seen films not with the same conceit, obviously, but like trying similar techniques in art museums. Like
yes.
So like I guess so if you don't know what happens in this movie, so this movie's like about the family of Germans who ran Auschwitz. Like they live in a house next to Auschwitz.
It's Auschwitz Commandant Rudolf Haas.
Yes, and his wife and his kids and his mother-in-law, who all are living sort of an Edenic life right next to the Holocaust. And you hear the Holocaust and see occasional intrusions of the Holocaust in their very mundane lives. And the whole movie, you're kind of just watching the business of having a life next to the Holocaust that's barely impacted by it, waiting for the moment where, oh, okay, they're going to have to reckon with what they did, or, oh, they're going to lose all this, or, oh, there's going to be payback, or, oh, they're going to meet a Jewish person who changes their mind or guilts them or shows us how evil they are. This movie relentlessly refuses to give us any narrative development at all.
To the point that, and we'll talk about the end more in detail, but it ends with the main character dry heaving and not even being able to vomit.
Right, correct.
Because it is entirely about this idea of how it's basically about like I don't even know if it's posing the question, but it's how someone could just sit there and passively ignore one of the most horrific things happening. This movie
it's a smart idea.
Yeah, this movie deserves every award in sound design and sound editing
100%.
because that was I looked into it. Apparently, the sound designer created a 600-page document of everything that happened at Auschwitz, and basically created the sounds of all the things that were happening, because we never see anything. So for people wondering, this is a horrific movie. It's a grisly movie, but it is not visual. It's not visually showing anything.
You never really see much, yes.
Yeah, that isn't to say it's not extremely upsetting. I want to talk about how this was made real quick for people to kind of understand, because the plot is, it is just following their lives. He gets a promotion and gets transferred. His wife doesn't want to be transferred. He asks for his family to be left behind. They
do. Yeah, they do.
And then that's like the basic things that happen. To film this, they set up 10 cameras in a house, right? This was shot at Auschwitz.
Yeah, I know. That was crazy.
And I know, yeah. And they created a replica of the house. The actual house was nearby, but it's owned by someone else, so they weren't going to shoot in somebody's home.
Right.
And so they, I don't know if actually someone lives there. It was a private residence, that's all I know. The point being that they made a replica next to Auschwitz. They set up cameras, and they had no crew, no lighting, because for a few reasons. One, it's fucking Auschwitz. So it's like, we're not going to set up a bunch of shit here. There's very few swastikas, I think, for that reason. There's obviously the SS symbols and the uniforms and stuff, but I think they were trying to be as tasteful as they could.
It's pretty muted, even on the pageantry front.
Yes.
You know?
And it's just watching this family, almost like security cameras, walk through the house in these wides and have kind of a life. And there's obviously other scenes where they're shooting, and it's clear that they like set up and had a crew. But for the house stuff, which is the majority of the film, it's that.
With the exception of controlling the light, and like once you put the people in costumes and make sure that the daylight is manageable, this is very much a movie you could sort of just set up a camera with like 3 guys and get it.
They said no crew, all practical lighting, all natural lighting.
Yeah.
So so I assume it wasn't low budget, because the sets and stuff are incredible.
Yeah.
And so the whole movie is that. And it's sort of, and so the key to the movie is the sounds. It slowly, it's this beautiful location.
Yeah,
it's
it is
gorgeous.
very
There's
Edenic.
this brook.
Yeah. It is.
You hear the sounds of nature.
Yeah.
Like the first things you hear is a woodpecker, which sounds like gunshots, but
that's
isn't.
right. They do that a lot. Yeah.
They do.
They do that a lot.
And the violence slowly kind of like the first scene where he's out checking the canoe, because they give him a canoe for his birthday, is like they purposely shoot one side of the yard, and you kind of hear a few gunshots, and then it turns and you see the tower, and that it's almost like a horror reveal, but it's so quiet,
So like, see, to me, I think the most interesting thing about this movie is the structure of it.
Yeah.
I mean, most people are going to, and rightly so, they're going to focus on the soundscape, because the soundscape is where the meaning is happening. You know what I mean?
Yes
or
and
like,
no. I do think a lot of it's performance and what...
Agreed.
There is a story being told, and we can...
There is a story being told, 100%. I just think there's a lot of fun ways to skin what the premise of this movie really is.
Yeah.
Because, like, I think we've described it as events, and it is events, but, like, really it's a premise, like, it's a high-concept premise that you can sort of think of in a bunch of ways. One of them is, if you're a filmmaker and want to make a story about the Holocaust that's impactful, how do you do that now, right? I think that's the question Jonathan Glazer was kind of engaging with when he read the novel this is based on, which, as I understand it, is somewhat... and I'm going to use this word gently, I hope, somewhat evocative and dramatic.
Interesting.
Like I hear the novel, like there's like interior monologue, and it's very much like soaking in the pain of it, right? Like it's not it's not this. So like I think Jonathan Glazer made a really interesting choice here, and that choice is to assume the Holocaust, you put it in their audience. You imagine what it is, because you already know it. You've seen Schindler's List. You've seen The Piano. You've read accounts of history, and understands on a mechanical level several things. One thing is the audience is going to be more horrified in some ways by whatever they imagine than they are by seeing it, and he's right about that.
Yeah.
Another thing is, like, by robbing us of the moviness of Holocaust films, you actually feel the horror of it more keenly. You feel the discomfort
realization
of it,
that there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, there's nothing. It's very hopeless. It's very helpless, and
it's just happening.
You're aware of your discomfort physically, your emotional discomfort the entire time you're watching the film, because it never gives you the music. And I could have given you one more, like Oscar Schindler does.
Apparently, there was a score, and he said no score.
Yeah, and that choice is really interesting because I think it is a way of doing a new version of telling the Holocaust story from a filmic perspective. You know?
Yes, it's almost like the skin deep part where it's like, just like literally what you're saying. Well, there's so many movies about the subject.
Mm-hmm.
How do you tell this story in a way people hadn't seen
or feel? How do you feel it anew? Yes.
I also think there's some relevance to today. That he's getting, it's not a huge message. He's not being preachy, but I think there's a little bit about that because it's the story he chose to tell. I think is very purposely told this way, and it's supposed to make us feel a certain way.
Yeah.
Because we'll get into the ending more, but the ending, for people who haven't seen it, and I understand why people wouldn't want to see this movie.
Which will be most people, I think, ultimately will not see this.
So the movie is, as we're describing, a series of events, and they get slightly more horrifying. You realize that, the servants in the house you can tell how stressed they are, how everything's perfect. You realize, of course, like, they're prisoners, a lot of them. Some of the ones that are in the house, she says, are locals, but and the main, I'd say, Sandra Hüller,
yeah.
from Anatomy of Fall is really, really good in this.
She's devastating in this. Absolutely.
Yeah, you realize she's the wife, and you start with that question of like, what does she know? And then you realize very quickly she knows everything, and she likes it. And she loves the power. She loves having everybody wait on her because they're treated like kings.
And she very clearly comes from a world where this was out of her reach.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there's one key line.
Her mom, the line from her mom, right? Yeah.
Yes, there's one key line that the mother says about wondering whether or not this woman who is a Jewish woman who she used to clean for is in Auschwitz.
Yep.
Right? And it's like it's a thrown away line. It's like one of those lines you're like, oh my God. But then you realize like, oh, this whole life that her daughters put together that they're sort of like patting each other on the back for is very much like, we're the ones that figured it. Like, they think they're smarter than everybody. They think they're better than everybody because they managed this.
It's in her performance so subtly. The impression I got was that she's acting like a fucking criminal. Yeah. Because what they're doing is a crime. Yeah. They are stealing everything from everybody around
these
them.
People. That's
They're
correct.
pillaging, and there's these scenes where on her face, it's the exact same expression of someone stealing from someone and going like, well, I deserve it more than you.
Right.
Like, it's that fucking vibe from her. And it's so well done from her performance. Like, she's trying on coats, and then she
That's
reaches
the
in the
best
pocket,
one, I think.
finds a perfume, and it's like, oh, and you realize like, oh, that was in there. She didn't buy this coat. She didn't buy anything.
Well, she also goes into her own room to try on the coat, which sort of, again, suggests that
it's a crime. Like, she's in
she
hiding.
knows she's doing something wrong. Yeah, exactly. You know,
and
the
body language is that of criminals.
Yeah.
But criminals who don't care. And she feels like, like, I'm getting mine. Essentially, like, you realize that it's spite. These are spiteful, ugly people she loves being treated like a queen. She threatens one of the servants, says, I could have my husband spread your ashes, is
that
essentially what she says.
Crazy moment. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's like near the end where you go like, Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah.
Like, she knows, there's no denial. There's no self-denial. There's nothing. There's a scene where her mom, who you mentioned, leaves the next day. She realizes how horrifying what they're doing is. Mm-hmm. It's implied. And there's
it's
a
only
sequence.
Implied, though.
It's only implied.
They never say it. Yeah.
Which I love.
They have a great moment where... sorry, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, no, you go.
Well, they show her sort of seeing the chimney one night, and she can't sleep, right? And the chimney is a sight you can never see enough or too much. You know what I mean? Like,
And
it's like, oof, you know,
it's like a fucking dragon. Like
Yeah.
the noise
It's dark.
and the heat.
Yeah.
And it's made to be as sinister as it truly is.
As it was, correct. And so she's watching it, and you don't. And so, like, this is another thing the filmmaker does that's amazing that kind of contributes to this. You almost never get a close up in this movie.
No,
you almost
again,
never get a shot size that is more tighter than a wide shot in this movie.
Right,
So,
I
like,
don't-
that's the
they don't-
filmmaker denying you the human connection, even with the people you're going to watch.
Yes.
You know, and that's an interesting choice. So you don't know for sure how she feels about it. All you know is she's gone. Then there's a note that's written to her daughter, played by Sandra Huller. You don't get to read the fucking note.
No,
You
she just puts it in the
guess.
furnace. She doesn't
Yeah.
think about it.
And then she's
That's-
furious.
That's
She's furious,
the thing
you
is,
know?
I think the movie, because the thing is that fuck her mom. The thing is, her mom is
that's right.
horrified with it, but she doesn't stand up to her. She just quietly leaves.
Yeah.
There's this idea that like she's not. Nobody in this is portrayed, or they don't want us to think of them as a good guy. None of the main characters, none of the Nazis, obviously. And so even the mom is like, she just kind of is a coward. Like she sees what she sees upsets her. We don't know why. She could just be like, I don't like seeing it. You know, she might not even care.
And it also
that
doesn't
is
really
being done.
matter from the point of view of. I think the movie is really good about, even though it's always in the background, centering the tragedy.
Yes.
You know, like never diverting from the tragedy, even for the juicy gossip stuff.
Right.
Like it never gets far enough away from the tragedy to care about why the mom did it, or for it to matter more than being another window into. And then let's see how she reacts when somebody close to her sort of tells her this is wrong, even inadvertently, and she reacts like a monster. You know.
Yeah, any ups and downs the characters go through, I think, is to show us, because there's a part where her husband doesn't want to be transferred.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't care about this guy being transferred.
At
Why
all.
are they showing me this? But that's kind of the point.
Right.
Like she starts talking about the sacrifice he had to make so they could live here, and it's like the sacrifice he had to make.
I think it's
like,
really
it's
telling how she doesn't want to. She doesn't want to leave, and that's like the only emotional conversation in the movie where she's like clearly being disloyal to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like he's like, you know, well, we're gonna have to go to this new place. That's the deal. And she's like, no, because to her, this achievement of living in this lifestyle is the crown jewel of her life.
Yes.
Like this is her precious. You know what I mean? Like that's what it is. And he doesn't matter to her. Like she would have done anything to get to this place. It seems.
Right. It's weird that we're talking about her the most, but her husband, they kind of, I mean, you know, obviously he's a terrible fucking person, but they focus a lot on her and her indifference. Like I feel like we almost, I don't know if we don't see her more than him, but it's also the performance is so good. Like the night where her mom is up, the baby's also crying.
Yeah.
Everybody's awake but her.
Right.
She's sleeping like a baby.
Right.
And it's nuts. Like they want our blood to boil. Watching this woman and her husband.
They kind of do, but they also want to take that away from you. They also want to take outrage away from you and make you sit with it. I think he's doing both things, kind of. You know,
the husband, it's like he's so bureaucratic is what makes you upset. Like they show them designing and talking about the furnaces.
Right.
Just they talk about the loads that they're putting in the furnace like they're nothing. Whenever they interact with any prisoner, they don't even say anything to them. Like the prisoner will like bring them something, they just take it. Like they don't see these people as humans throughout the whole fucking thing.
Yeah, and also like. Yeah, that's true. And that's true of every Holocaust movie in a sense. But like he's also just sort of this like meek, sort of like a little smarmy, but mostly like a guy you'd walk by in a hallway and not think about.
he's a pathetic little man. They show him in like the moment they show him in his little bathing suit, they're kind of showing him off as like, look at this pathetic little guy who gets this power.
Kind of. So like
him and his wife love it, you know.
But again, it's not exaggerated. Like he's not like E.B. Farnham from Deadwood, who's like,
no, there's no mustache twirling.
Yeah,
you know?
and there's also no like, oh, you're such a little wuss. Like it's not that either. It's just he just feels so run of the mill, and so like nothing charismatic or impressive about him at all. Just a pure bureaucrat with a very little bit of personality. And you're like, man, this guy did all that? And then you like Google him afterward and you realize like who this man really was, and you're like, whoa.
Right.
You know?
And it's interesting because I think they did this on purpose where his wife, they make her say and just way more of an outward sociopath, I think, for the ending, because at the ending this guy goes to this party and he calls his wife and she's like, how was it? And he was just like, I wasn't paying attention. I was just thinking about how the best way to gas these people.
Yeah, that was kind of
and
a weird
you realize,
choice, I thought.
I think this goes into what I think the movie's sort of about.
I'm excited. I want to hear this.
I think it's about two ideas: indifference and passiveness, contrasted with like the corrosion of the best way to call it is corrosion of the soul. Watching, and again, you don't care about these characters. I want to make that clear. But you're watching a family, especially the kids, kind of the kids who were born into this, who don't know any other world, don't know what their parents are doing is so bad. Although even the kids they show,
they kind of
do.
Yeah,
and it's about like this evil and how this evil is corroding them, and how they can just passively let this happen. I think because like all the sound design and the way it's shot is like almost like the sound design is a horror movie, and you like the way they start by showing this house. Like one of the first shots is all the lights going off one by one in the house, like a sitcom. And they're showing like this is a family having like a summer. They show like the kid, like two kids making out in the back of the house. They show kids constantly playing, a dog running around, and they all you like. It feels like a memory. Like this like,
a little bit
sweet family gathering with this thing hanging over them. And then near the end, there's a few moments where they show the little kid playing in his room, and it's like, again, it's a memory we all kind of have, like playing with toys in my room, the sun shining in, but you can hear them drowning a man.
Right.
And it's like, fuck.
Yeah, it's really
and you
gnarly,
realize
man.
like this kid is soaking this up, and he's not even reacting to it. And then later his big brother traps him in the greenhouse and pretends to gas him.
Yep.
And so you realize like, yeah, this is this utter, like these people just straight to hell, like, and you're, and with this, like this glaze of indifference and passiveness over the whole thing.
It does make you angry. It does make you angry and grieve, kind of. Like I felt like a lot of like, man, like just sort of sad for this that this happened. You know what I mean? Just like you kind of can't believe it. There's a bit of incredulity, like like you're just trying to get your head around it in some ways.
Right.
And there's a little quote I think you'll find interesting here. So like the lead who plays Haas was interviewed. And they asked him, movies take a long time to make. You're with the crew at an absolutely cursed location. How do you have lunch? You still need to have a laugh at work. And his response was, we felt the dimension every day and the responsibility to the victims, but it was chilling to just have a lunch or dinner where we could watch the camp. I was surprised at how easy it was to ignore where you are. I must be honest about that fact. Then I would realize and say, oh my God, I can't forget where I am. But to protect yourself or to survive, you forget.
Yes.
That's fascinating to me, That's
also on theme. I think that's the theme of the movie.
Yeah.
Because we should talk about the ending. So, real quick, him saying the gassing line, I think was the realization of like, he would kill anybody at this point. Like, that's what it is he has become... he is hollowed out. He is just a sociopath. He is just
not
a monster.
really even murder.
Whatever humanity was left in him is gone. And I think that's what that line is. It's like he's at a party. All he's thinking about is gassing the people at the party in the most efficient way.
I think
that's it.
I think that tells you that I agree with how you're saying it insofar as I think that he no longer is connected to people as people. Like he doesn't see humanity anywhere.
No.
He's crushed it in himself. He doesn't see it in anybody. So the gassing thing becomes like the way his brain works to stay ahead. It becomes his like, this is who I make myself out to be to succeed in the world. So I think of it all the time. Right. But his body and like somebody in the back of his brain can't accept that he's become this way. And that's what the vomiting is about. The dry heaving is like, no, but you can't really divorce what you know from you.
But
you
nothing
might
comes
squish
out.
it. Yeah, it's not going to change him. Nothing will change him. He's still going to go down and do this. But like,
he's descending into darkness in the shot.
Oh, it's not even lit. It's like it's another example of like that's not a good shot, except it's a perfect shot.
Exactly.
You know. So anyway, when he's vomiting, this is probably something the audience needs to know. When he's dry heaving, you're like, oh, what's going to happen, right? And the movie kind of sets up that he might be sick because he has this doctor's appointment, and you're like, oh, is he going to get cancer? Like, you know, you just keep waiting for consequences, and they don't show up.
And you're waiting for like, how do you end a movie like this?
How do you end it? Yes, exactly. So he has this dry heaving. You're like, oh, something happened finally. And then he looks down this hallway, and for a pretty long time, there's a cut to a black screen with a very small light at the end of it that feels almost metaphysical.
Yeah,
like he's looking into time or whatever.
The hallway, yeah.
Or you assume that this is death, maybe. You know what I mean? And what happens is the door opens, and you're in Auschwitz. Like today in 2024
modern day,
and you watch a series of shots of people caring for the museum of the Holocaust, like of Auschwitz, with
people
all
cleaning it.
They're cleaning it, they're maintaining it, and then we're watching the shoe exhibit, and we're watching the hats, and we're looking at the pictures of the people, and it's done again in the same mundane, jarring way. And it's implied he like sees that, even like it's sort of connecting that. And then goes on with it anyway. Pretty wild.
Yep. It's basically him, looking to see what his legacy has become. It's the gas chambers he designed being maintained. And so this is where it goes back into the indifference and the passiveness, because what they specifically show are workers cleaning. And these people are at work. And this isn't supposed to say, like, how dare these people work? Like, don't get me wrong. It's people who are at their job, exactly how you're describing this actor eating lunch, right? Is that these people have to go in and clean this every day. And they see it every day, all the shoes, everything that happened.
Right.
And they are numb to it.
It's also mundane.
Not because they're evil or bad people, but because it is every day.
And because you have to. Because you have to.
Exactly. And so it's these two moments of disinterest and numbness meeting across time for two very wildly different reasons, right?
Yeah.
These people who are numb because they have learned about this tragedy, they've thought about it, they've grieved about it, and they have to just do their job. And this man who is the complete other side of the spectrum, where it's like he doesn't even care about these people. He doesn't see them as people. He doesn't see what he's doing is wrong. He's a sociopath. He has completely sold his soul. So I think there's a message there about the idea of like, we can't let the scar heal, right? Like we have to get through our day, right? We can't live every moment thinking about every tragedy that's happening, but it's sort of about our ability as humans to protect ourselves from those tragedies and the spectrum of what that does to us, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, like, I think part of this is one of the rare movies where I think it'll be important that it came out historically in 2023 and 4 when anti-Semitism was rising.
Right.
Like, it'll be important in a historical context way to understand this movie in part.
I think it'll always be important too, because there's always 100%. Something horrible that people are doing to each other.
But what I mean by that is that part of how you'll view this movie like 20 years from now, I think, or depending on, I mean, who knows how the future will go, but like, is understanding that like this movie is also a contemporary commentary on how we are slowly forgetting it.
Yeah.
You know, how
because
we are.
Why wouldn't it's going to become so more and more abstract over time.
Right.
That we have no choice but to forget it. You know, it's kind of like you look at young people with 9/11 where you're like, wow, yeah, they weren't even fucking there.
Right.
And like 9/11 is not nearly as massive as, you know,
oh, no.
the death scale. No. And so like it's about how, yeah, like that. I feel like the name Zone of Interest, I assume the Zone of Interest is referring to something specific.
Yeah, I think Zone of Interest is a reference to, I looked this up. Okay. I think it's a reference to the actual space the Holocaust, like the Auschwitz was built in, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I forgot.
But it also plays into this idea of like disinterest, of passiveness. Disinterest isn't quite the word for it, but it's numbness. And yeah, like over time, you know, we are more and more emotionally separated from these events.
Yeah.
So I do think there's some sort of, they're making some sort of like analogy between this man and the way we can look back. And obviously it's not comparing us to this man or like saying we're the same, but it's showing that like it's the same result, you know, like no matter what the reason is, the numbness is there.
Yeah, it's actually in some way it's kind of easier. It's a more effective way to get us to grieve about it afresh. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't want to like compare this
is
and
like
that.
Bone chilling of a film.
Yeah, it really
like, that's the thing is like it's one of those films that when you first hear about it on paper, you're like, I don't know if that's going to work out, because it's like, oh, let's do the Holocaust from the Nazis' perspective. Like, who gives a fuck, you know? Right. And then you realize it's kind of the entire point is like the Jewish prisoners are barely seen in this, only heard, and it's kind of it's about that. It's about these people who are erased, and it makes it even more impactful and tragic, I think, by not showing like people being so mundane over something so horrific.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like, I'm not an expert. Everybody's going to have a different
and to be
view
clear,
on that.
Like I just want to, I just want anybody who's like thinking of watching it to know, like there also isn't really a lot of, like Nazi war stuff. Like there's not even the military or administrative drama that normally would accompany a film, but from the bad guy's perspective. Like, you're not in the brainchild of anybody talking about the Holocaust, planning it. Like right. There's a few scenes that are very bureaucratic, that you're sort of waiting for there to be personal drama. That's the thing, is you're waiting for personal drama to happen with these Nazis, and that never comes. No. Like and so like again, it's just another way of. It's a repugnant idea, as you said, like, let's get the Holocaust from the Nazi point of view. But it isn't even that. Like, it isn't even schmaltzy enough to, like, what was it like for these monsters?
Like, you could argue, like, Downfall is closer to that.
Yeah.
Like, Downfall, which is a film about Hitler in the bunker, it's more removed from the actual camps, but it's way more emotional, and it is showing, like, their perspectives more. And that movie managed to do it also in a way that I would argue was tasteful in what the message was. You know, they kind of depict them as a cult in that one.
Sure. I mean, like, you can imagine a lot of different versions of a movie that you may agree or disagree with that would be that premise. You probably would never imagine this movie. That's the thing about it that's so incredible is, like, again, because this movie is relentless, like religious, if you will, about never, ever, ever giving you personal connection to anybody. Never. You will never have a personal connection. You'll never be invested in anything. You'll never be rooting for anything. You will
it also
wait.
Plays into
you will wait for meaning forever, and it will be taken from you. The only way you get anything is when you think about what happened, which is great.
Right.
It's what should happen.
Yeah, because it also is showing how separated these people are emotionally from everybody around them. including their own kids and family.
Yeah, and like not that it needs to be this, but it's also like I think it may even stretch to like this is a story that stretches into any situation where one group of people is terrorizing another, and like what does it take to ignore that? You know what I mean? Like
right,
it is that broad. It's like wow, you know, like yeah.
What I like that this film does, it never tries to explain what that takes.
Right.
You never understand how they could do this. Like the whole movie, you're kind of sitting there going like, how could they ignore this? How could they possibly go through this, go on with this? How can they hate? And the answer is like they hate these people that much.
Yes, that's right.
That like they're not ignoring it, they just don't care. Like they have a scene where she's in bed with, and they're talking about this delightful vacation they went on, like any other couple. And then she says, I think I wrote it down. She says something where she says like, chocolate or anything
can you bring
sweet,
me chocolate? Oh man.
And what she's saying is like it's a grocery store. From the camp, anything you find, can you grab me that? And then it hard cuts to him it's the only shot of him in the camp, I believe, and you just see it's the
close up of his face. Yep.
Yeah, it's the closest shot of him. He's still turned away from us, and you see the fucking that skull patch and the smoke, and you hear these horrific screams that are being cut off by gunshots.
Yeah.
And you see his face just completely indifferently watching it. And so it's to show like this. It's just the movie is kind of designed around this roller coaster of taking you from these like mundane family moments to these intense, grotesque moments of brutality, and showing how these characters are whipping themselves back and forth between them with not a care in the world. It also
the movie is also interesting as a kind of Rorschach. You know what I mean? Because like he sort of takes so much of the indicators that a filmmaker would normally put onto your story or onto your people away, that you are filling in your judgments and emotions in the situation a lot of times, which is what you should do, and that's really interesting. But like it's interesting. This as a film experiment just blows my mind. Like it just it blows my mind that a director understood that taking away the things that filmmakers do was a better way to make this movie.
Absolutely.
Like, I'm going to think about that for years. I do
want to talk about, we haven't talked about the
black and white stuff.
The black and white, or it's polarized.
The polarized stuff. Yeah.
So I had to look into it because first I was like, is this a dream?
Yeah. What is this? Yeah.
And I've watched this film twice, and then I looked into a little bit. It's a subplot. It's actual subplot based off a real person, a Polish girl in the town who is a member of the Polish resistance, who would ride her bike into the camp, into the fucking camp, to leave apples in the camp so prisoners could find the apples. And later you hear that someone's fighting over an apple.
Right. Right.
It's based off a real person. It's Alexandria is the only name I see here for this young girl who
it's accompanied by this music, by the way, that was described in a review I read from the New Yorker as like subterrestrial belching.
Yes.
You know, like it was like the earth is like belching.
It's Lovecraftian almost.
Yeah, it's so dark and crazy. It's like the only place there is music too. And you're like, man, what is going to happen to this girl? Like, it's another thing. It's like it makes you think that's going somewhere, and it isn't really. Other than it's just another look into this that is intentionally obfuscating you from the humanity of it.
Right. Well, it's depicted, again, almost polarized, right? Like, it's almost like through night vision.
Right. It is exactly like that. Yes.
Yeah, there's a couple things about it. One, it seems to coincide with any time his daughter is sleepwalking. Because he finds his daughter a few times.
Well, that's interesting.
That's why at first I was like, is this a dream? But then looking up, there's this real young lady who did this, done in that way. It's almost, I feel like so the daughter, I felt like there was like, again, it's like showing this like psychic damage to these kids, like and then coinciding with this girl doing this very brave thing. I'm still trying to figure this out.
I don't know
it's
what it
almost
means exactly.
because it's polarized. It's almost showing this like genuinely the only good thing to happen in this film, showing it almost from the Nazi perspective as like, no, this is bad.
Yeah, kind of. It feels
Like she's
very
in
much like it's the only point where you're actually touching the pain, and it's treated like an alien's doing it. You know?
Exactly. It's like the belly of the beast. This girl
Yes.
is in, and that's where the music's that way, where you're afraid for this girl.
Yes.
And it's to show this a place that has been depicted very bright so far and sweetly as being like terrifying. It's also the only time we see in the camps, inside of them.
Right.
So it's like making the camps this like terrifying abstract that this young girl is extremely brave to fucking break into and actually give something, like put something positive in there.
But to be clear, you also have to say part of the meaning of it has to be that it's refusing to let you understand that.
Yeah.
The movie is intentionally saying, but we're not going to let you get that. You know what I mean? That's the kind of thing that feels like it would be
Right,
like a
well, they
breath
never
of fresh air for for you as a movie watcher to be like, oh my God, finally somebody's not a complete fucking degenerate
Right.
monster. Like,
they don't even tell you who she is.
No.
But she's depicted, because of the polarization, her and the apples are both bright. Everything else is dark. So you get the impression that this is goodness in an otherwise dark place, right?
Yeah, but it still has the effect of reinforcing the sort of grim obfuscation of the film. Like that's that's what's so brilliant about it to me is like that like he managed to make the one good thing that happens in this movie also off-putting.
Yeah,
and
terrifying.
alienating. Yeah, it's amazing that he did that.
Because I think it's because those scenes are from her perspective, meaning that this world where we're not really seeing it from the Nazis' perspective, but I do think the point, like, again, it's beautiful, it's sunny, the birds are out, it's there, they love where they are, right? She's like, I love raising my kids here. So it's the one scenes to show from someone who's like, this is a nightmare, this place is a nightmare, and it's shown like a nightmare.
Yeah.
I think that's the point.
Yeah.
Because it's a scene from the perspective of a character it's the only scenes from the perspective of a character who knows how horrific what's going on is, or who understands or, feels that.
I will say that, like, I think the average moviegoer will spend more time trying to get their mind around that piece of the film than anything else.
Well,
like
it's so loud.
It's the loudest choice. It's the choice that feels like it must mean something, but it defies meaning the most.
Yeah.
The way it's presented.
I think it is just to show like this world from the perspective of someone who's actually like us, who actually is horrified. I think, I don't know. I think it's that, and I think he also never wanted to really show in the camps. So I think that part
makes
of
sense
it.
too. Let me ask you this question. Does showing any act of goodness without this obfuscation diminish the power of the film, do you think?
I don't think that those scenes were diminished.
But I know. So imagine they did them in the same style or whatever as the rest of this film, right? Imagine they weren't like some alien fucking telescope from the great beyond.
Okay, I do think it does.
I do too. I agree with you.
Because I think what the movie really wants us to feel, and I feel it with the music, and there's that part where they show the flowers and then it fades to red.
Right. That's another like what? Yeah. Yeah.
It's to show, because I think what he's trying to say with the sound design, the flowers, not just the sound design, but focusing on the nature, the birds, the flowers, and the gunshots, is to sort of point out like what they're doing is not natural. Right. This is not natural. This is not like, animals kill each other. No, this is the most unnatural it can get, and it's treated unnaturally, and that's the point, to show this horror that is so unimaginable and so, again, incredibly unnatural against the nature, and to show that contrast. There has to be like sort of like a a very stark contrast being made throughout, where it's like this unnatural thing is pushing upon nature. I think that's my interpretation of it.
I think, the word unnatural really chokes me up thinking about that, because that's a really good word for what you take away from it. Like, actually, this movie's hit me in waves in the days since I've watched it. Like, it's upset me in waves.
Yeah, it's upsetting deeply.
That's a good thing. It is really hard to imagine these people doing that and not caring.
Right.
It's hard.
Again, it's corrosion of the soul. It's the real life equivalent of like dark, like just pure darkness that you see in like fantasies, you know, like it's that's how he's depicting it, of like, this is a dark force that is corroding the souls of everybody around.
And boy, it sure
and
feels
it's
like
not,
it. Yeah.
And it's not pitying them. They are making the choice to do this. They are the ones selling their souls. And I know it's weird saying that as like in the terms of souls, but that is sort of like,
that's the beauty of that language, is
the metaphor of this thing is like, that's what we're watching. These people go into the abyss, do something that is beyond evil and beyond and is totally unnatural. And he's trying to show, like, I think the spiritual like scars of this action,
and the fact that he grounds it actually in a strange way makes it feel more spiritually bereft than any heightened melodramatic version of this story could do.
right?
As I said to somebody who I went with to see this, like, Schindler's List is one of the greatest movies ever made. It's a fantastic movie, and yet I still think we wouldn't respond as powerfully to Schindler's List today as to this, or at least I guess I wouldn't. You know what I mean? I guess like there's a certain amount of like you need the fresh look at it to remember again.
Yes,
this
and
movie's
I
good
also
for that.
It has to do with the types of stories, right? Schindler's List or like Life is Beautiful. It's the more important story, in my opinion, which is the victim.
Yes, 100%.
Who have to overcome this unimaginable thing, this horror being happening to them, right? Like that is the main story, and that's why this is the kind of film that can only happen now,
because
where
that
it's like after
movie
we've
exists.
told a lot of those stories. Yeah,
correct.
Where it's like, okay, we've told those stories. Let's talk about the opposite, the people doing these things, and how it just spirals them into this darkness that they could never recover from. And like, it doesn't forget the victims in doing that, but it's just a way more grotesque story to tell. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, obviously it's way more upsetting. It's harder to watch. But it's framed in a very important way, which is like the focus on the indifference, on the numbness, on like never let yourself go completely numb to this. And that's why I think it works. It's it's an accomplishment. It's a real,
very much so.
Yeah, it's very a real like tightrope to walk.
Like, and it's not just like Marcel Duchamp's Urinal, right? Where it's not just a statement about form. It's also a statement about form that, as I think I've been saying, is one of the most effective ways to show the substance that he's talking about. I read some critiques that thought that any schmaltz or any attempt to actually bring the drama of the Holocaust is sort of belittling the premise. Like, the New Yorker kind of eviscerated this movie a bit in a way that was like, I can't believe that shit. I thought that I found that offensive, because like, let the man tell his story, and you can't you can't deny. You need to make it palatable for the audience that's going to see it.
Again,
you know what I mean?
And I wish I remember his name. The director of Funny Games has talked about like any movie about the Holocaust, and I kind of understand that, because it's like movies are
Haneke. Michael Haneke, yeah.
And Funny Games, if people haven't, we covered Funny Games. It's specifically about it's weird to say it's similar to this, because it's structured in a way where a series of violent things are happening and you're waiting for the movie thing to happen.
Right.
and it never happens, and that's the point. The point is no. So violence isn't cinematic. It's tragedy after tragedy. It's just pummeling you. And that's sort of the same thing here, but like I don't personally agree with it, but I understand that idea.
I understand the
like
critique.
it doesn't really matter how you're doing it. You're still doing it. It's exploitative no matter in what context. And I don't know. I think there's a lot of debate to be had there, and I think that's an interesting thing to constantly think about when watching these movies.
It's a thing that belongs on the level of movie critics having an elevated discussion. It belongs in that realm. But
Right.
for those of us that need to be reminded of the reality of the Holocaust, which is all of us, I think it's okay to step back and say, however, how like this minor bit of compromise in his artistic framing device is worth it if it allows us to have a fresh view of this.
Yeah,
Infinitely worth it.
I think the movie's more worth exploring with that question.
Okay.
Is like the ones that do like, hey, there's Nazi zombies. Even Tarantino,
Yeah, 100%.
with Inglourious Basterds.
Yes, 100%.
Where you're like, now it's just becoming like they're just next to, it's just werewolves, Nazis, zombies, Dracula.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's like, what are we
Right.
doing? We're turning them into a Halloween costume. You know,
We're turning him into a safe place to pour our movie vice outrage. You know what I mean? Like,
but again, and that's what this is
movie won't let
about,
you
which
do
is
that.
like, yeah, but it's also about like we get numb to things, to tragedies, because we also have to cope. So it's like, you know, it's a very complex conversation ultimately.
yeah.
Of like, what do we do with it? I think it's easier, or it's more. Time of course matters, right? Where it's like they made movies about 9/11 like 5 years after it happened, and it was like, that's weird. Even if they try to be as respectful as possible, still feels weird, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, think time is a factor.
I guess that's
but-
true. I don't know. Like,
But
yeah, I
agree.
agree
Should
that
it be a factor? You know,
I agree that 5 years after 9/11 certainly felt like we don't need this. I remember feeling that way.
right? Like, how will we feel when we're 70 and they make like a Michael Bay-esque 9/11 movie where they're like Titanic? You know, the movie Titanic, where they're showing the propeller guy.
Well, here's the thing.
You know what I mean?
So this
like,
is
what is that?
This is where I think that's an interesting question. Is like, okay, but the people who are 20 when we're 70 will have no concept, or will not have the language to have a concept of September 11th without a Michael Bay version of it, because that's the world they're going to grow up in.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I mean,
and
we're-
like, it's
we're-
like,
yeah.
is that bad? Yeah, it is. It isn't good, but also like, isn't the greater good there that they have an emotional experience of 9/11 and remember it to some degree?
It's tough because,
You know?
So yeah, for people listening, we're obviously straying from simply talking about the Holocaust,
but we're getting
in this,
to-
but
we're-
different tragic things. Like you could watch Titanic and go like, oh, they turned this into a love story.
Yeah, it
but
shouldn't
you
be,
could,
right? Yeah.
But you could argue that yes, they're trying to create humanity so people could empathize with it, right?
I mean, right. A movie is a particular art form and has particular conventions. And if you don't deliver on those conventions, you didn't do the other thing you're trying to Trojan horse in with that convention, which is make us care about this event, which is the whole
Exactly.
point of the movie.
And
you
put
know?
humanity on it, where it's
Right.
like, take these black and white pictures and make them fully realized people that we care about, so that we don't get numb for it. That's an argument. That's an argument for it as well.
I think it's a pretty
So-
powerful argument, you know? Yeah, like I think it's,
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how the movie's done too.
that's
you know,
right.
like
This movie to me feels like it transcends that argument altogether. In that's what's so great about it.
I think it's tackling it. I think it's addressing it. Again, I don't know if that's necessarily absolves it or not. Obviously, I really like it. It's one of my favorite movies of this year, which is weird to say, but it's such an incredible film.
It is.
watch.
I'm surprised you watched it twice. I mean, I know you had to, but I don't know that I would watch it a second time.
I'm glad I watched it a second time. It definitely was hard.
Right.
It's an upsetting movie. It's hard to watch more than once. It helped me. I could kind of detach this time around because I knew I was going to be talking about it. So I was thinking more about how it was made.
Yes.
And the techniques. The first time I watched it, it sort of just washed over me.
Did you have an emotional experience when you watched it the first time?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that gut wrenching feeling, that like knot in the stomach.
I felt very I felt a lot of discomfort, and occasionally the pain of it, what was happening, would leak in.
Yeah. And again, that's the point. It's like you almost forget, and then it cracks you. And they do that, I think, specifically in the sound design, where it's like you start to drone it out the same way they are, and then they hone in on the sounds again, and they never let you forget what you're hearing for that reason. There's
also a great little scene. Like, there's so many like little moments that are all sort of in service of underlining the premise. So like that's one thing I really appreciate about this, is that not only did he stick to his premise really hard, he pushed on he underlined the premise really hard with all the beats that he chose.
Yeah.
Because remember, this is an adapted story. So like this guy's tearing out lots of huge sections of this novel to do this version of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is very different, is my understanding. But one cool one is, and it happens early, is, the sound design is not loudly present. It's still very background. It's only because you're sort of sitting with the movie for a while that you start to really pay attention to the background sounds. And one scene that helps you do that is in one particular place where there's a lot more gunfire. This guy and his horse, and his son and his horse, are like wandering around, and over the sounds of gunfire and screaming, there's a very faint bird call, and they're like, blue heron. Like they can hear this bird, and you're like, bro,
he says, you hear that? You hear that?
You hear that?
And
exactly.
And he's not referring to the gunshots. Yeah.
Right. And it's
because they have drowned it out. They don't even,
they drowned it out. That's right. It was pretty wild. This director also directed, Radiohead's Street Spirit music video, if you remember that, which is amazing. If you haven't seen that, he won an MTV award for that.
Yeah, this director, man, I talked about this movie on Hypecast a while back because I was like, I heard the premise and I heard I realized who it was, and I was like, that can be nothing but brutal. Like Under the Skin, Sexy Beast, Jesus fucking Christ, yeah.
Under the Skin is insane. Under the Skin is actually one of the scariest movies I've ever watched, I would argue.
Yeah. And that means something. It's very specifically sort of, there's a lot of symbolism and stuff where it comes to Scarlett Johansson and how she thought about her career and stuff. I know there's a lot of like behind the scenes stuff there that I don't quite remember because I haven't watched it in a bit, but
it was a bold movie for her to do. Is all I can say off the top of the dome.
And he also shot it similar to this, where he created these very real moments. So it's definitely a technique that he loves.
I mean, so like, I feel like most filmmakers and frankly most entertainers are like deeply contrarian in some ways. Like that's sort of, I think, part of what makes us want to do this. It's like, that we want to push back on the way society is. I've rarely seen somebody harness it as effectively as he did here.
Yeah,
because again, he's this is a bold movie. Like this was not a home run of a way to do a movie. I'll tell you that right now. Like it could have been terrible, offensive. It could have been either of those things.
I mean, this is so far. I mean, it's limited release, but I mean, I don't think it's going to make its money back. And it was made for about $15 million.
Absolutely, not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. There's no way it's going to make its money back. It's too.
It's not made
unpleasant.
For that,
yeah. No. No. I mean, we let David Lynch make movies, and it's like we should, because what he's doing is interesting and advances the art form. That's the exact argument here. It's part of the argument here, I would say. This
is a movie that they might show to students.
Yeah, they should.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, they should. It's like, and I would say, like, I mean, again, I think the Holocaust piece of it is why everyone should watch it, because it's important to go back and remember that event. It's a sobering event that, aside from the pain that people still live with from it, is important for us as we develop our picture of what is human nature. That is a piece of history that we got to keep present tense to remember what human nature is. Right. Like that's a part of it. But aside from that, as a storytelling exercise, this is how you use film for meaning, it belongs in the conversation with, like, you know, I'm thinking of movies I shouldn't say, but, like, you know, all the early films that developed what a feature film is, or, you know, The Godfather, or it belongs in that conversation, or Citizen Kane, where it's really pushing the medium forward.
Yes.
You know, because it is doing that.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, just watching it and going like, yeah, I guess this is how you can make a movie like this. And it can be extremely effective. And yeah, it's an incredible film. It's bleak.
But I can't. So, like, bleak makes you think you're going to have a sad emotion. And I guess a lot of people will have that, you know, like, but I think a lot more people are going to have the emotion of being frustrated with the movie for not being a movie.
Yeah, it depends on the people. You know, like I said, my audience fucking cheered for the Nicole Kidman ad. So they were like, yeah, let's watch a movie.
Here we go,
right
baby.
now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it was like, oh, you're not going to get a movie.
This will be bad for you.
Yeah. But it kept my interest both times because there's so much detail in it. And you're watching these people, and it's sort of like there's this frustrated feeling the whole time. You're watching these people.
I don't think that's going to be true for most movie watchers.
I don't think so either.
Most
but
of them are like, what am I watching? What is happening?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I think most people are going to be like, I just feel sad and bored.
Yes. Sad and bored. Correct.
Yeah. And that's a shame. But also, again, it's not. You know, it's not for...
But it's an invitation, right? It's like, you know, you don't go to a meditation retreat and expect it to be comfortable for the first couple hours or maybe even first day. Like, it's, you know, you really got to get... It takes work to get to a place where you can enjoy something that requires that level of concentration.
I will say it has a very high audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, which surprises me. But I think it's because...
I don't think people are willing to disparage the film.
Well, I think it's that, and I think most people who are going to see it kind of know. Like, I don't think this movie is advertising itself as a fun movie, right? Like, you're going to see it, and you kind of know, like, all right, this is going to be fucking hard.
Nobody thinks its life is beautiful. Like, I mean, they've done a nice job of being clear. It's difficult. It's a difficult film.
Yeah, but there is a lot. I'm looking at, and there's a lot of reviews of people who are like, I was bored.
Yeah. It is boring. It's deeply boring on purpose. You know, like, that's right. That's the thing is, like, you know, again, a movie has a contract with the audience, and that audience, and that contract is, I will make you care. Caring is more important than whatever else, whatever emotion you get. At least you cared.
It depends on the movie, right? Like, if this was a movie about talking dinosaurs and it was boring, you're like, well, you failed, right? Like, this movie being boring is part of it's succeeding.
It's one of the only movies where that is true. There are so few movies that can claim that.
It's weird because I wasn't bored.
Yeah, but Dave, you like every movie. You like watching a movie in itself is a joyful thing for you all the time. No, I mean,
I understand how people would find this movie boring. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that, like, I'm surprised that watching it twice, I was sort of at the edge of my seat with this movie.
I think it bears...
because it's so fascinating to watch.
Forgive me for being so rude. I totally just interrupted. And I've been doing that. Forgive me.
You're fine.
I think this movie, if you engage with it intellectually after the fact, probably is super rewatchable, actually. I don't know that I want to, but I can imagine myself in a year being like, I kind of want to see what I missed the first time and and contemplate it afresh, you know? Because it deserves it, you know? Like, it'll never be my favorite movie. It'll never be in my top 20 favorite movies, you know? But it'll be... But as a filmmaker, it's haunting, really. You know, as I said to somebody who I was talking to about it, it was like, this guy went and from frame one did every single thing they tell you not to do in film school. Like, I can list them all for you. I could, it's like no close-ups, no frontal shots into the eyes of the characters, no stories, no, their hero doesn't want anything. On and on it goes. One of the
first things I was told in film school is, like, one of the clearest signs that a movie is amateur is if the camera never moves, if it's always on sticks. But this is done in such a it's the editing, like, elevates that fact that, like, I remember it took me like a half hour to suddenly go like, wait,
Have we
the
moved?
camera's not moving.
Yeah, have we moved the camera? Yeah.
We haven't, and it moves a couple times. When she's walking,
a very little
like,
bit. Yeah.
Yes.
There's some zooms and stuff.
Yes, but for the most part, it's almost always. Again, he planted the cameras in like it's like hidden cameras almost, like they're just like in their houses. So like once you like, you pick that up pretty quickly when you're watching, because I was like, I think this is all just being shot. Like I'm pretty sure they're just doing scenes and like improvising, and that sure enough is what they were doing.
I would argue like a few like as you're doing it experiences that I had that I think are kind of interesting from a film telling, like a storytelling perspective. I don't think the edits are that good on purpose. And what I mean by that is not that they're bad cuts. They're jarring because we're cutting from one wide to another wide where you're not immediately sure of where you are in relationship to where you were. You know?
Yes, sometimes also the sound drops out in weird places.
Yes.
The beginning is like 2 minutes of darkness over music, which felt very 2001.
Yeah, it did.
Which I don't. It's hard because I don't know if he's specifically invoking 2001, but he must have thought about it. But again, there's this sort of cosmic horror to the film that I think he's trying to kind of creep into our heads with a lot of the sound design and filmmaking.
I think that's also I think that's literally a tool, a psychological tool for the director to get the audience into the headspace of the film.
Yeah.
Like in that you're watching the screen of black and everyone is having this experience. I fucking guarantee it. You think, oh, did the projector not work?
Yeah, there's
like,
a
are
second.
we not seeing it?
The music stops and you just hear nature.
And you're like, oh, is this a mistake? Like that's that's intentional, you know?
It's intentional. It's also making us, it's basically saying, listen.
Yes, listen.
Like,
correct.
You have to listen. And so, like, for that reason, if you're watching this movie, like, assume, if this comes out on streaming or something, don't watch it, like, in a loud room. Watch it quietly. It's meant to be watched quietly because hearing it is very important.
You're not going to be able to plug this movie in like and do other stuff and have the experience. Like
exactly.
This is a rare movie where I'm like, it's a theater experience not because of the picture or sound or any of that, but because you need the dedicated time and the feeling of being committed to watching it.
You need to be
get
locked
the full
in
experience.
a black box.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of, you know, like it is a true theater movie in that way, in a way that honestly none of the other movies but maybe Oppenheimer this year are. Right. You know, this is the most theater movie experience out of all of them, I would argue.
Yeah, it's this idea of like, listen, this is going to be hard, so you need to focus. You need to listen, you need to watch, you need to have no distractions around you. And yeah, it works really well for that.
There were times I was literally smiling at like how cruel the film kind of is. Like one example is
to the audience.
Yeah,
in a way.
Cruel to the audience.
Yeah.
Exactly. So like one example is after this guy Haas, who you just like, you don't respect him, you hate him, you're also bored by him. Like there's so many ways that he's unlikable, and he gets transferred to this to this place where now he's the commandant director or whatever the fuck of this other horror show. Okay, so then like he's writing letters to his wife, who it seems like kind of just doesn't like him. Honestly, like that's kind of how it feels. It's like she's like, I don't really care about you.
It doesn't feel like either of them.
They don't really care about each other much. You know, like they're sort of
again like she's like
she likes the life.
You fuck off. Go fuck off. Go get transferred. We're going to stay here.
It's very telling. Anyway, so like he's telling, like he's writing letters and stuff, and then you're like, okay, well, at least you keep getting tricked into thinking, well, we're going to see what happens at the new job, right? And all you see of the new job is a shot of him walking down this walkway to the building, and then it cuts to another reverse shot of him walking away from you to the building, and then we change subjects.
Right. He has a meeting. He does have a meeting,
but there's like this one moment where you're set up to think, oh, we're going to get a mildly interesting plot point. Nope. He doesn't give it to you. He just shows him walking. It's amazing.
It reminds me, I think the way it's designed is like, this is a weird comparison, but like when you watch like a superhero movie,
right?
Again, crass comparison.
Like say Ant-Man.
well,
that
no,
one?
like, and so you look at Thanos and you go like,
Yeah.
does he ever just like take a dump or does he just like
Right.
relax in bed?
Right.
That's what they're showing.
Right.
They're
Only
showing
that.
all the anti-scenes, the
Right.
scenes where it's like the uneventful moments of these people doing extremely eventful and evil things. And that's, again, the point. The point is that question, how can you live with yourself? And they're like, well, let's show you how they can live with themselves. This is how they're doing it. And it's disturbingly mundane.
I kept thinking
Like-
about some study I read that was like the percentage of people that would murder somebody else if they knew they would get away with it is like stunningly high.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's not like 10%,
Yeah.
it's like 60% or some crazy number, right? Where you're like, what? And this movie really brings that out. Like
Yeah, it's-
this is
I
what
wouldn't call
happens.
Right. It's not cynical because, I mean, it's not overly cynical because it's like this shit happened. This
Right.
isn't
It's
making
real.
this up.
Yes.
It's real. But it is like, again, it's that thing that, yeah, so many movies show evil people be evil, act evil over the top. And they're like, it's like, no, this is what evil looks like.
Yes, it's much
And that's-
more human. Correct.
And that's the point. The point is to show you like evil doesn't look like the way you think it is. And you need to know that so you can know if you're in the presence of
Correct.
it. You need to be able to understand that like it's not obvious. It looks like everybody else. He stops and pets a dog and he's like, what's the breed of the dog?
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
yeah, that's kind of the entire point of
Yeah.
this is yeah.
And I appreciate any movie that makes me consider more deeply what human nature is.
Yeah.
I think that is honestly my fun movie fundamental. What should a movie fundamentally be about? That's it.
Yeah.
And this did that pretty much more than any other film this year. I would
Yes.
argue.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
This is incredible.
Yeah, although quick argument for Poor Things. Poor Things, another film that did that pretty effectively, I would argue.
I need to see that. That's still
Buddy, you gotta see that.
I mean, it's hard, man.
I know.
We were originally gonna cover ISS this weekend, and I still need to see that. I need to see that. There's a lot. I need to see fucking Night Swim or whatever. Although the critics don't seem to indicate that I need to see it, but I'm just.
But
there's
you know
so
in your
fucking
heart
much.
you haven't
Yeah.
you haven't daved until you've watched it.
I
so.
can see that on streaming, but yeah. Are we? Do you feel like there's anything else you want to say? Because I have one thing to say at the end of this. If we're at the end,
I don't think I have anything new to say. I just don't. I mean, yeah. I don't have anything new to say. I hesitate to leave this story behind a bit. Like I kind of don't want to end the episode because I'm like, it's such a powerful, important film that I didn't
Right.
enjoy that I don't want to leave it behind.
I know. If
yeah.
you're, I don't know. There's either people out there who are just like, yes, I'm going to see this movie, and they're probably not listening to this.
Most likely, right?
There are people who are like, I wasn't going to see this movie, and now I'm going to listen to hear someone talk about it because that's way easier than seeing the movie, and I understand that. It's a hard movie. It's very emotional. Like I said, it kind of depends on what.
It is not very emotional.
No, I mean,
is-
like, it's emotional to watch, meaning that, like, depending on what upsets you, you know what I mean? Like, the sound design is upsetting. There are upsetting things you hear.
That's true. Yeah.
You never see anything upsetting. And I'm just talking about like what a person's limits are, what they can personally deal with. I think it's important to watch this film. I don't think everybody has to watch this film, but I think that, it's an important film. It's also important from a filmmaking perspective, but it's also important of just portraying these events. If it's hard for people and they still want to watch it, I'll give you one behind the scenes fact.
Okay.
Which is that the Nazi dog in this is Sandra Huller's dog.
Oh.
Her actual dog. So just know watching it that the dog's in it a lot. It follows people around.
Yeah, the dog is
just
in it
know,
a lot.
Yeah, that the whole time there's a little dog running around going like, mommy's doing something. I don't know what, but I'm having fun. That dog is having a great time. The dog doesn't know. It's just hanging out with kids and people in a
That kind
backyard.
of adds to it, though. Like that kind of adds.
Yeah, that's
to, like,
sort of the point of the dog.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, just know that the dog is with its mommy. It loves its mommy. She's there. It's following her around. It's very big and important. There's food probably being dropped on the ground. The dog's having a great time making this movie. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I don't know if it helps either.
Yeah.
Because like I remember distinctly feeling when I was watching the film, like, God, that dog just adds so much. Like it makes it so much.
Oh
worse.
yeah, the fact that the dog's having a great time
just makes it so much worse. Yeah.
But to know that the dog is actually, it's not a trained dog. It's not under pressure. They literally just threw her dog in there, and her dog, I assume, is not trained. It's just running around, being a dog. You know.
I really, yeah. I'm sorry. I know that my stuff's all been mostly filmmaking stuff, and I know that's maybe not what people will connect to the most and shouldn't connect to the most when they watch the film.
I don't know. People are listening to hear us, and we're not experts in the Holocaust. We have a very specific perspective.
Yeah.
Where it's like there's probably other way more important people to listen to talk about this movie.
Definitely. But I will say
this is what you got.
I will say, like, it inspires me to trust in, like, it inspires me as a director to see this guy trust himself with something this dangerous and explosive and go this hard at it. You know what I mean? Like I really I love how much he believed in his own idea of it and how clear of an idea he seemed to have doing it.
Yeah.
With what seems like not a lot of control ultimately. You know, like, you know, when you don't have a crew and you're like letting loose dogs run around and stuff, it's like, you know, like that, the potential for things to be, you know, not pitch perfect is higher.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah. He's not being like David Fincher or Kubrick where he's like, everything has to look exactly like this. Obviously there are lines that he needs them to say.
Right.
And I'm sure there's moments that are crafted, but he allowed the actors to sort of breathe in this environment. I'm sure they didn't want to improv that much, to be honest. I'm sure they're like, I don't want to live in this character.
I think if you're gonna, but I think if you're gonna do a Nazi thing, right, and you're gonna play a Nazi, I think being asked to improv is actually an important way of really doing it, and not like I think you. To perform Nazi and do anything schmaltzy with it is worse than not doing it, or worse than like it trivializes it. You know what I mean? So like I do think that for these actors, improving is a much more like it's more of an act of service to the story in an important
for sure.
way. You know,
Absolutely,
and I don't think they would. I feel like every actor probably would feel that as they were doing it. You know, it wouldn't feel good. I'm not saying that's a good feeling. I'm just saying that I think the appeal of acting. Well, the appeal of acting is to find truth, even if it's truth you don't like.
I also think like there's a script here, so I'm guessing they're still doing all the same things. It's just those little moments. You know what I mean?
I don't know if there's much. I mean, like again, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's a script. You're right. It doesn't feel very scripted to me.
Well, the conversations are definitely scripted, right? Like when she's talking
a few
to
of them
him,
are, for sure.
When she's talking to her mom, stuff like that. And like just reading the behind the scenes, it's clear that they had a script and the actors got to read a script. And,
Sure.
Yeah. So I assume it's more about like, you know, I don't want to guess of how it was made, but I assume they had communication with the people there, right? And he was probably watching it and probably giving them direction. And they were just doing the scenes as best they could. But I assume things like the background action and stuff, I'm sure they weren't like, okay, everybody back to one, you know? Like, I assume it was like if there's an outdoor party scene, they're just letting everybody do their thing. And they'll just keep doing takes. Yeah.
Well, I also think, like, again, the mise en scene seems to be pretty, like, messy in a way that, like, they're cutting like 90 degrees around a circle often. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So like continuity is less of a problem, probably.
Yeah, probably.
So, you know, I think this guy sort of built a shoot that gave him a lot more freedom. He also was the director of Virtual Insanity, Jamiroquai's Virtual Insanity.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Radiohead's Karma Police music video.
Yeah.
Those are both pretty great.
Yeah, he's a very good director.
He's really good. Yeah, he's real
he's
good.
one of my favorite directors. He has been slowly
I think I agree with
pushing into where I'm like, this is one of the best directors working right now.
Yeah.
Just for Jamiroquai alone.
That's a
Just
good video.
Jamiroquai.
Look, we can joke all we want. That video rules.
It does rule.
That
The video rules.
It's so good.
We should have done a podcast just about that video.
Dave, I'm
That would
around.
have been
What are you
way
doing right
more
now?
fun.
What are you doing right now, Dave?
Should we watch
I'll
it? Should we watch it real
Let's do
quick?
a whole podcast. Let's do it. Like, with all the conveyor belts and everything, and the hat. We could do 20 minutes on the
There's
hat.
no
Easy.
conveyor belts. They move the room.
Well, right.
Adam,
But
they moved the room
room's on like a
around.
giant conveyor belt, Dave.
So from my understanding, what they did
Okay,
is
here we
they attached the camera to the room. The room is on wheels, and they're just moving the room around a warehouse.
Oh, I didn't know
so
that.
the room's moving, nothing else is moving.
Oh, that makes sense, actually.
Yeah,
Who
the
cast?
magic of
Who
cinema.
cast the hat?
I assume Jamiroquai.
The hat
cast
is the hat is the thing you'll always remember from them, right?
Yes,
Okay,
of course.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
All
all
right.
right, we got to the bottom of that.
Yeah. All right. We
This
successfully.
was really more of a 5-minute podcast.
Yeah. I'm not gonna put. We just watched the Zone of Interest / Jamiroquai's. No, I'm not gonna do that.
Why not?
But I
Why
am
not?
glad we had some fucking
Like fun?
lively
Yeah.
conversation because Jesus fucking Christ,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
movie.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh my
I
God.
don't regret realizing that Jamiroquai's virtual insanity needed 5 minutes of our time either, Dave.
Yeah.
I'll never regret
Oh
that.
no. Yeah. I don't regret, but I am sorry, or not sorry. I don't know. I don't know how to feel.
Well, I regret a lot. I regret a lot. Yeah, I also I guess it's just sort of obligatory to say, if anybody not obligatory in a bad way, obligatory in a good way. If anybody here feels like I don't want to have to, I can't handle the emotions of that, or that in some way we were flippant, please don't feel obligated to watch it. And I'm sorry. No,
I'm sorry, but also it's the point of the fucking movie.
Yeah,
it's the ending. It's the people cleaning the Holocaust Museum, where it's this as a society we know these things and we've grieved for them, and I've known about the Holocaust since second grade. I remember reading about it and being told about it,
Right.
being horrified
right.
by it.
right.
And I continue to be horrified by it, but it's about that numbness and how we cope with these things,
Right.
for better or for worse. You know,
That's what I appreciate about it. That's what makes me think it's such a great contemporary film about it.
Yeah,
Is you have to know where your audience really is, and I feel like he does know that.
he does. Yeah,
Although there's just some things you can never dilute the power of those shoes, man.
No, you
Or,
can't.
You just can't. It's or the gas chamber itself, how insane it looks. Yeah, it's just
Right.
yeah.
And there's all these conversations. I've been to the Holocaust Museum. There's a gift shop, and it's that feels weird, right? But again,
yeah.
it's I know there was questions about Auschwitz, the camp, when there was a point where Auschwitz was falling apart, and they're we have to do. We have to
Maintenance here.
maintenance. We have to fix up Auschwitz, because it's also a museum. You go there, you see the place. So there's this weird question of do we put money towards refurbishing Auschwitz? That doesn't seem right. Right? There's this. It's such a.
It's complicated.
There's so many angles, and it's so
sure.
complicated. It's so fucked to think about these things.
But
Yeah.
to me, well, whatever. Nobody cares what I think about that, other than to say if there's any one thing that we should never forget, this is it.
right?
I think almost any amount of effort to keep it present in our minds is worth it.
That's also kind of the core of this movie. Is
Right.
just never forget, because that's I think the reason why this has to go across time. This movie, why they have to show the Holocaust, the Auschwitz Museum, because this is bigger than one moment.
Yeah.
It's weird. I'm sorry. In a lot of ways, it has some structure to 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is weird to me. Just the beginning and that ending, and going through time and space through a tunnel. It's just interesting to me that I think a little of this has that DNA.
Well, I also think 2001 is a movie about how latent human violence is. You know what I mean? And I think so in that way, it's sort of, they feel connected too, where the violence in this film is very much being squished down,
it's a weird movie to connect, but I feel like the director had that in his head a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, anytime anybody makes a film with like unusual editing conventions and stuff, you know, you gotta feel like they probably took a quick spin on 2001, because that film feels like the granddaddy of all narrative experimentation in some ways, right? Like,
yeah,
not the only one or the first, but the most important. Anyway,
yeah,
we did
movies,
right? We did it.
Oh God, we did it! Oh my God. Yeah, we can end this. Okay. Adam, thank you so much for doing
my pleasure.
This.
Yeah.
This is quite a fucking conversation.
Yeah, we had a good time though. You know, I mean, as best we could.
did.
You know.
Yeah. You want to plug some more stuff? You want to plug the same stuff?
Yes, I do, Dave.
Whatever you want to plug.
Dave and I have never made a podcast.
Never
anywhere on this network. So don't look for it.
You'll never find a podcast.
We'll never do it again either,
one.
Dave.
We'll
never do it again.
We didn't do this one.
No, exactly. Right. So, yeah. Thank you, Dave. That's right. So, also, if you enjoy talking about video games, I have a podcast about that just for you called One-Upsmanship with my buddy Michael Swaim. It's over on the Small Beans Patreon. We like it a lot. So, you know, maybe you will too. I do. Yeah, I have like 5 different podcasts on there, and I love them all. So if you're not familiar with Small Beans and you're like, what is that? Go check it out. You'll see some stuff. A lot of it's movie based. Some of it's just about me and Maggie being friends, and that's the good stuff too. What else, Dave? I don't know. I mean, you know, I don't know, Dave. That's it. Oh yeah, I'm reading your screenplay, Dave. I want everyone to know that I'm reading it.
It's a little dated, but I hope you like it. I need to do another draft.
I like it, Dave. I like it a bit. We're going to talk again about it.
All right, good.
Okay,
great. I'll plug the Patreon over here. Gamefully Unemployed has a Patreon. Patreon.com/gamefully unemployed. GAMEFULOY. Unemployed. There's exclusive podcasts on there. We do movie nights. You can join our Discord community. There's a whole thing. So check that out. Why don't you? You can also go to gamefullyunemployed.com to see our merch store. And Jamiroquai. Watch the Jamiroquai music video.
It's a nice palate cleanser.
It is. It's. You know? I assume it's available on YouTube.
I just looked at it. Okay. I didn't watch the whole thing, but there's a 4K version of it on Vivo right now.
No shit.
Yeah. It looks fucking great, Dave.
I'm reading here that Jamiroquai is the name of the band.
Yeah. Did you not know that?
No, that doesn't. I thought that it's just some dude with a hat named Jamiroquai.
No, it's a band. There's a whole band. I mean, the dude with the hat is the avatar of that band.
He is Jim. You know, he shouted to that band, "I am Jamiroquai."
Certainly before the end, he did. There's no question.
Yeah. Are they not together anymore?
He has the I don't think they would be, but he has the audacity to call his genre acid jazz.
Wow.
Acid jazz, Dave.
So you're happy to know Jamiroquai is still together.
Oh, I am happy.
Yeah, they're working on a new album right now.
Oh, great. The vocalist we're thinking of is named JK. Yeah, JK.
All right. Well, we learned something today.